Hi, everyone. So excited to be here, especially with my good friends Dave Snell, Jason Jurado, and Catherine Chadwick. Catherine's been on the show many times and just recently has come back into the circuit. Dave and Jason are old hands at Thursdays, so very excited to be here together and see what we can do to build value. The word of the day is transcend, and we'll let Dave go first today.
Oh, joy. Always love that. Thank you, Don. No, it's always a pleasure to be here. I look forward to today's conversation. It's great to have Catherine as well. My first thoughts on transcend is I never really thought about the word. We always use it. I'm going to transcend this situation and go do something better. And then I had to look it up, and it just means to grow beyond where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us are trying to grow, at least in this group, and those who are listening are trying to grow beyond what we know and where we are in life. And that is really the mark of a solid effort in our lives. I mean, we have to go beyond where we are. We're going to transcend our current situation, no matter what we do, whether we want to or not.
Great start, Dave. Glad I picked you first. Jason.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great word and great points, Dave. Is you talk about that as we use that word a lot, but I too was like, well, let me make sure that I'm deeply rooted in what this word means before we step off there. It becomes kind of a catchphrase for some. Two things I'll offer about transcending is just to start off, and hopefully maybe we'll get back to them. If not, I'm just looking forward to this conversation today. Is one, awareness. Be aware of where you're currently at. If you're I'm gonna drive across the United States, but you don't know where you're at on the map, that's going to make for a hard trip. And then the other one is be aware that there is a beyond, talking about going beyond a limit or a boundary or whatever. But if you can't see that there is more to life, that's another sticking point. So be aware where you're at and be open to seeing that there is more. And I think that's a good root of transcending.
Absolutely. Catherine, your turn.
Well, I love the topic. I think it's fabulous. And I found a quote from Abraham Maslow. And I'll also bring up some information researched by Scott Barry Kaufman and about Maslow's work and how some of it was misunderstood. But anyways, so the quote is, if you deliberately plan on being less than you are capable of being, then I warn you, you will be deeply unhappy for the rest of your life. You will be evading your own capacities and your own possibilities.
That's terrific.
Mm-hmm. I agree with what all has been said so far, because I think it's imperative to realize that we are part of what many people refer to as a collective. We're all part of the universal energy, the universal information field. And in the midst of many self-proclaimed experts, there's way more to learn.
Yes. Well, that's a wonderful foundation and a beginning of a great conversation between us. When I think of transcend, it's about, it seems to match with ascend, which is rising. Mm-hmm. Not just moving, because transcend seems like you're moving from one place to another, but not always in an upwardly direction. And the key, I think, is why do enough when you can do so much more with the same time and effort? Mm-hmm. Some people just do enough to keep doing enough. And some people decide to break through, and decide, hey, I'll give it more effort, more thought, a little more time, and make something special happen. Mm-hmm. And how do you create those special moments and opportunities in your life as well as the people around you is to be a little more dynamic, to be a little bit more productive. When you say my work is done, does that mean you did enough, or could you have done more? And the other question is, where are you going from where you're at? Mm-hmm. In other words, if you're going to rush to leave something to go to something mindless, was that a good direction and opportunity? And, by giving it a little bit more, you're going to identify or be identified as a person who gives more than they take, reaches for higher levels of achievement and effort than most people around them. And then that becomes the norm again. And then how do you transcend that? I mean, it's like muscle building. Whatever weight you started at is your beginning weight. Some people never get beyond it. And other people decide to stretch and say, I can add another pound today. So there's a lot of dynamics to it and opportunities. Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Don. As you were talking, transcend versus ascend, it kind of made me think of your comment there, Catherine. You brought up the word experts. And we always go to what the experts say, and we can never get beyond this limit of human endeavor, this limit of whatever it is that we're up against. But if I want to transcend, I'm not just going to go up to and meet that limit. I'm going to transcend it. I'm going to go beyond it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to prove them wrong. Einstein, okay, we never reached this level of knowledge. And then he transcended. And it made me think of revolutionary versus evolutionary. Mm-hmm. Evolution is just going to take you along a certain path, but if I can transcend it and I can be a revolutionary with it, it's going to go beyond. It's going to take me higher than I thought that transition or that evolution would have. I'm going to transcend the expectations. Mm-hmm. Those were my thoughts as we just went through the circle there.
Great thoughts. Gives me a lot of ideas, and I'll hold them. It's not easy.
I will just add that I think it just proves my point. I've recently done a couple of other podcasts, and I've been introduced as the expert on a subject matter. And John Boyd of the old OODA Loop fame hated that word, and I read his bio, and I said I kind of agree with him, because an expert means, if someone says you're an expert, it almost implies that you know everything about a subject. And none of us can ever know enough about a subject. So I understand the use of the word, but at the same time, if I'm the expert, I can be transcended at the same time, just like I walk through. I mean, it's not an end all be all. So.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Jason?
Yeah, great points. And that's why one of the things, to Dave's last point, one of the things that I try to do as we have these conversations, because we usually talk from a high level, and we usually talk from doing things and being there. And I always try to make sure to include those that haven't started that journey yet, because we talk from a place of, well, we've accomplished this and we're accomplishing more, because we're all, for the most part, we're all very excited about life and about transcending things and moving forward. But you have to remember that there's those that haven't reached that yet, and being an expert, I think, is knowing that you don't know enough. To Dave's point, is you learn a lot, and then that you can step back. To step back from that, one of the things that came up through this conversation so far is that I had a CEO that used to always talk about, realize this is the floor, not the ceiling. And I think that so many people see the ceiling. Oh, well, this is it. I'm in this room and that's it. And it's like, no. He used to always preaches. He had his other issues, but one of the things I took from him was, the floor, not the ceiling. And the other thing I'll mention is that as we push boundaries, as we grow, just remember that the crabs in the bucket are going to try to pull you back in. And you have to realize that you cannot you can't depend on public opinion to know where your next step is, because people want to keep people in that bucket. And so when you start to transcend things, just realize that your world is going to change, and you have to be open to being that tip of the spear and keep going forward, because it can be a little scary out there when you're at the tip of the spear. But you know what? The rewards are so much greater that it's a wonderful life.
You bet. Catherine.
And what's been said has been highly valuable. And I believe that along the vein of being the tip of the spear, understanding that as we learn more, as we move forward, as we move upward, our level of vibration changes. So we're not necessarily a match to the crabs in the bucket any longer, right? And so when we can look at that things from an energetic level, it takes some of that emotional sting out of it, I believe. And then it makes it almost easier to say, oh, okay, I'm just at a different vibration right now. And so isn't that a fabulous thing? The other thing that's interesting too, talking about other people influencing how we think, how we move forward, and whatnot. What I found through Scott Barry Kaufman's work and his study of Maslow's work is that Maslow never drew a pyramid, right? That was a marketing strategy that someone that, you know, at the marketing office, the marketing company put together. And his work is, Scott likened it more to, it's more like a sailboat, right? Because the energy is always moving, the wind is always changing, and being adaptable and being resilient and understanding that, yes, you know, you may have had a very strong hull and a very solid rudder heading out, but if your rudder breaks or you get a hole, you've got to go back down to the bottom and fix these things. Right? And so it's not just going up the ladder one step at a time and disregarding what you've, you know, what that rung you stepped on before. And I think it's really important for people to understand that, and correct that misconception that many people have been operating on, because, oh my gosh, how many talks have been given, you know, about the hierarchy of needs, and this is how it works. Well, it doesn't work that way.
I think your marketing strategy is a great analogy to it, is what somebody just came up with to help sell it. More than just a real understanding of what Maslow was trying to say is important.
Right.
And it's been misinterpreted. Don's back.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm glad you said that, because until someone tells me I'm back, I don't know if I'm back.
We didn't even know you were gone. I'm sorry.
I knew I was in trusted hands, and I knew even if I never came back, it would still be a great conversation among the three of you. And you know, what it does show is things change whether you do or not, but for things to change, you need to change. And, you know, transcendent, some of it is like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You know, it's not a major leap usually. It's just a decisive decision to move beyond where you're at. And wherever you're at may not be serving you as well as it used to, or you might find a different interest. And by being flexible and open, because one thing about change, you can typically go back to where you were and what you were in most cases. But people who don't know how far they can go or where they can go will never get there. And sometimes you need to take the initiative just to test the waters, because what you think until it matches reality is just a good thought. But once you're in the middle of the scrum, let's say, you start to become a little bit more aware, and everything is new. It's all new stimulus, right? Go from one city to another, go from one group to another. It's going to be different. You're going to have to adjust instead of hoping the world adjusts for you. So there's a lot of fun in it. There's a lot of fear in it. It depends on how you approach it and what you're comfortable with. And some people, I know, the Jason situation as well as mine, let's say in retail and other situations, there's people who are doing great until they were promoted. Right? I mean, they were a great store manager, but they were never going to make a district manager, and they were happy.
Right.
And those people are thinking, hey, I'll do you a favor. I'll give you more responsibility and more money. Some people may not want that. So the key is to really align properly with what your situation is, and to also get knowledgeable. Knowledge is power when it's applied. So I'll go to Jason now.
I think Dave's in the rotation. We'll give him a shot.
I got up
By the way, it changed a little bit. That's all right. You know, something you said, Don, kind of triggered my mind of, if we transform and we change, we can always go back to where we were. And I would submit that I had a furrow of my brow, because I'm thinking, if I've truly transcended, would I want to go back to that next lower level, or would I want to come back to the next? If I've transcended the A into B, would I want to go back to A or at the bottom of B? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I've truly transcended the situation where I was, I something to think about, and maybe I'm making more out of it than there is. The other thing that you know, Catherine, your comment about vibrations. It's funny you bring that up, because today I saw a post on LinkedIn I agreed with very highly or very strongly. Was sometimes it's okay to burn bridges. You're not always going to mesh with people who are not in your transcendent path, if you will. They're not coming along with you. It doesn't mean you forget them. It just means they're not along the journey with you, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a strong point that people, to Jason's crab point, I'm glad he brought it up again. People are always going to try to pull you back to where you were, but that's not the same vibration you're on anymore. So why not let it go? Mm-hmm. And if you got to burn a bridge, you know, destroy a road, whatever it is, it's not a path you're going to go back to. So why do it? And again, I think that kind of ties back to, if I've transcended A, why would I want to go back to it? So I just a couple thoughts.
Makes perfect sense. Catherine.
Well, and in regard to, you know, burning those bridges and whatnot, it made me think of how I often think about always being in motion, and pretty much being like the water. And the water doesn't wait for the rock to get out of the way, right? The water is always moving, and okay, so we might get stagnant for a little bit, but we're going somewhere, right? So I think it's important to keep in mind that we're meant to evolve, and we're meant to change. And when you were talking earlier, Don, it reminded me of you know, when you were talking about going back to the same level, it reminded me of a high diver, right? And when they're up on that diving board and they do come down, but the base is always moving too, right? And so we want to put another rotation in there, so we need a little more momentum. And it's going back to, we're always a work in progress. And whether we're going up or whether we're going down, we're still in motion. But sometimes I think that we do have to go down a bit to get that rebound, to move back up again.
Well, and I think I totally agree with what we're talking about today. Looks like we have a person in the audience, which shows that it does work. I'm always wondering until we get the first. Thank you so much for being here. And when we get back to transcendence, we also have to put it in a time frame. You know, what is your goal? In other words, you want to lose 30 pounds, great. It's not going to happen overnight, or at least not sustainably. Mm-hmm. So if you give yourself the time, you don't leave until you really find out where you're going, right? Too many people jump off a cliff and they hope to grow wings before they hit the ground is not always a great strategy. And putting your toe in the water, you know, is always easier than putting your whole foot or diving in. Either way, you know, and that's how some people learn to swim, is they just get tossed in and they start doing whatever.
Did we lose Don again?
Yeah, I think he's frozen a little bit.
I think, Jason, you were next in the rotation there, yes?
Yeah, definitely. Great points, you know, and the one thing I'll go back to, talking about the A to B, I think the tragedy of life is that a lot of people actually do that. A lot of people do transcend. They get out there and they're confident. And to my earlier point, then the worry kicks in. And the other people in the peanut gallery starts to tell them, "Oh, you sure about this? You know, that job you were working, you were only making $10 an hour, but, you know, as an example, but it was safe and you were guaranteed, and you sure you should do that?" And it starts to get in your head. And I was thinking about the movie The Matrix, you know, that you get exposed to this real world and you're like, yes, and then something pulls you back into it. I think that's one of the greatest tragedies. There's two tragedies, obviously. Never transcending, or transcending and then getting pulled back into something that's not the greatest for you because of external, you know, pressures or whatever it might be. And so I think that unfortunately can happen. You can slip back. I think the key is to have that focus, to have that goal, like Don was just talking about. If you have that goal, if you have that set and you're secure in that, that's where you're going to keep going. Because it's like, oh, you sure you don't want to climb in a mountain? You sure you don't want to just sit down and rest for a little bit longer? Take that pack off. It's a little heavy, right? Nope. I said I was going to reach this elevation by 11 o'clock, and I'm going to keep going, and let's see what happens. And you keep stepping away because you have that mission. You have that goal, as Don was talking about. That keeps you in track. So when those little nibblings from the outside world start coming in and start telling you, well, maybe this is not this and this is not that, it allows you that opportunity to say, I have a plan. I'm going to work the plan. And I'm going to keep going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jason, I think that's brilliant. It made me think of last week's word with support.
Yeah.
We can't always do these transcendences by ourselves. It takes a community, as you always say, that word. I love hearing it. And again, to Catherine's point of the vibrations, we have other people around us that support network. And, I never would have made it through my first marathon if it wasn't for a support structure and a guy who had done 25 marathons and numerous ultra 100 milers. He got me on a training plan. He got me out of my own head, if you will, during the run, because he was running right next to me or behind me. So, transcendence isn't a sole effort. It's somebody else or others with you that can help you along that path. First thing that comes to my mind is, Buddhist monks. They don't just go and reach nirvana on their own. They have to be taught the processes. They have to be taught the meanings behind what they're doing. And, they reach transcendence. But it's a team effort. It's always something that needs to be done as a community.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I'm being seen. Sorry about
Yes.
I did something that might have fixed it. It got us, my router or whatever wasn't working as well, or my modem or whatever they are. But, talking about transcendence, I think that's also a test is when you're put in unfamiliar situations. Not everything is strategic. Not everything is planned out. It's like, geez, I found myself in a situation I'm unfamiliar with, or a place, or with other people. Well, how do I make that move so that I'm accepted? And some bridges are a bridge too far, or some bridges have already been destroyed and you just haven't accepted that. But I know one thing Napoleon Hill made a good point in Think and Grow Rich is the biggest challenge you have is friends, neighbors, and family. Right? Why? Because they're going to keep you or want to keep you where you're at with them, like them. And until you leave, will you really fully be free? And I think being free helps transcendence, right? If you're tied to something, if you're restricted, if you're compromised or limited, you're going to do little things and not the major thing that you need to do. And there's a point, I think, where there's a calling, where something just tells you this is the right thing, even though you have no idea where it came from or what you're going to do with it. But, it is something that not only, as we're talking, impacts you, but I think it was briefly touched on how it affects everybody around you, right? So when you get better, you make other people better. It may not be the same people. And the whole saying is don't be the smartest person in the room. Sometimes you do find yourself in that situation where you're helping others, but you're not helping yourself. And some things are really starting to minimize your potential. There's a point where you got to just say, it's been fun. It's been great. I enjoyed it, but it's not serving me anymore. Right? And if you don't serve yourself, who's going to serve you? I've never had anybody come up to me at work and say, hey, I think you should take a week off, until you decide to take that time. No, most people will not say, hey, take the time. Why? They want you where you're at, doing what you're doing, helping them out. And I think there's a point of independence and self-sufficiency. There's a point you have to cut the cord, right? I mean, you stay at someone's house when you're having a hard time. Well, there's a point where, you're welcome, and another point when you're not so welcome. And leaving early and having people want more of you is better than waiting too long and having people get so tired of you that you probably won't be coming back again. So anyways, getting back to wherever the rotation was, Nothing like losing your internet connection to forget where you were to begin with. I would assume
Catherine.
it's one of you, Catherine.
Well, it's all part of the process, right? You pick up where you feel it's important to pick up. So I do believe that it is not an individual or solo progression, because we need that connection to not only help sustain ourselves and find the vibrational match at the time, right? Because when we have that connection, then we have these beautiful cocktail chemical reactions going on in our body, which, you know, is an impetus to say, yes, I want more of that. And to your point, John, when you say, you know, you get to a point where it's not serving you any longer, well, those chemical cocktail reactions aren't so much fun anymore. And so the body informs us as well as the mind informs us. So I totally believe that it's imperative for people to really understand what they're made of. And they need to understand the body, mind, spirit connection, and they need to know how to work with it. And that's a process in itself, I believe, right? And we're always learning and always moving as we go, and there's always more to learn. And what's fabulous is, I believe that the universal information field is very welcoming for people who want to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, before I switch it over to Dave, you know, today we're not just dealing with ourselves and we're dealing with other people, but we're, you know, we added machines, and now we're adding machines that are like people. So it even gets more confusing in finding your bearings and identifying where you're comfortable in a chaotic, ever increasingly speedy world that we live in. So without getting too much into Dave's time, Dave.
Yeah, great stuff. I mean, I'm pinging in my head on Catherine's point of we need to know what we're made of. And I find that more often than not, to your point, Don, we're stuck with technology. We're not actually pushing ourselves out there. A few months ago, we brought up, or I did maybe, that how many times do we see kids with casts? We're not pushing ourselves. You know, kids are stuck behind technology. They're not exploring as much as they used to. So they don't know what they're made of. They don't know they're lowering their limits. And I'm not trying to get into a socioeconomic or, you know, political discussion, but it does have a limiting factor on our ability to transcend and for our youth to grow into who they can be, right, so that as societally we can transcend where we are now. To use the word, but very quick notes because I've got some mowers out and they happen to be away while you came to me, so I'll end it there.
Okay, sounds good, Jason.
Yeah, so true. You know, to those all those points, it's great. You know, the challenge is that now we have so much information and not enough knowledge and not enough wisdom. That's the challenge, is how do you, the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. You know, there's so much coming at you. How do you decide? How do you go through and say, okay, this is important, this isn't important? And I think it goes back to what we're talking about, is that you have to know what's right for you. You know, now I get that we've, you know, and I mentioned it before about we go through the 3 phases, the imprint and the modeling and the socialization periods in our lives. And then we pick up things from that. And unfortunately, when I work with clients, it's usually going back and cleaning those up, because it's not your own true thoughts. It's the thoughts from those around you. And maybe it's peer pressure. Maybe it's you know, your parent did something that doesn't work for you now. But that's the same thing with transcending, though, is that if you only look around you, if you only look in your square, how do you know what's outside of that square? So I think, you know, being curious and flexible thinking are 2 things I preach all the time. Be curious. What else is there? And then be flexible. What shows up? Hey, I've never thought of this before. I never heard of this before, but I'm going to try it out. I'm going to check it out. You know, I'm going to see what this is all about. That's a quick route to transcending. Once you go outside of the norm, guess what? that's outside of the norm, and it helps us move forward in a direction. And you know what? It may not be the right direction for you, but just by that, the word mindset keeps coming to me. Just by changing your mindset and being open to seeing what else is out there will eventually get you to where you want to go.
So true. Catherine.
And that makes me think about perspective, right? And because I think we talked about this before, we touched on it, we're all in a 360, right? And so, and what's fascinating is that the body actually follows the mind, right? It's the body will follow the mind to the kitchen because I think I'm hungry, right? and I've already decided what I'm going to have, and there might be a myriad of other things in the refrigerator, but no, I'm focused on that one thing. And what's interesting, and quite often when I'm working with people, I'll say, all right, I want you to just change your location, right? Get up, turn around, go sit in another chair, walk outside, or do whatever. Look at something from a different angle. And just that little itty bitty change of physical movement does invite most people to look at things from a different perspective. And I think it's imperative to realize that every day we have 360 options to think about any one certain thing, right? And so it's like, how boring is it to think about the same thing over and over and over? And if we understand, the negative default bias and all of those things, we can work around that, because we can say, oh, no, not right now. I'm not in any danger. I don't need to be, dealing with that right now. And to your point, Jason, about curiosity is huge. My friend Penny lived to be 100, and she was asked, what she attributed her longevity to, and she said curiosity.
I love it.
And yep, absolutely. And I think it just invites us to use more of our mind and our brain power, because I don't know, I haven't read anything recently about how much of the brain power we actually use, but it's, what is it, 10% of what, and to your point, Dave, about not using all that we are capable of, right? And I think it's important to push ourselves, to expand ourselves and say, I can do more.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great distinction, Catherine, because it's not so much what you need to do as much as what do you want to do, right? And when you have to do something, you find the time. Right? How many people say, I don't have enough time? Everybody's got the same 24/7. What are you doing with it? And the difference is having purpose. And I think, relating it to your friend, when you have a purpose, when you're driven beyond just physical needs, right? Too many people get very materialistic, get very self-indulgent, but there's only so much fun you can have with one, which is you, right? You can't, it's like clapping with one hand, it's just not possible. So I think the key is how involved. And when you're living a purposeful life and what you're focused on is bigger than yourself, you don't worry about yourself so much, right? That's where a lot of vanity and self-consciousness come in. How do I look? What do people think of me? Well, it's because you're not thinking about anything more than that, right? You're thinking about what can help you instead of who you can help. And by helping others, you help yourself get better. And you also learn. I mean, the four of us are learning today based on an open exchange of ideas and thoughts based on a word. But 75% of what's coming through is from three other people that no one would have that ability. And working in a vacuum is never a good place. Having tunnel vision or blinders on doesn't help you. But some people are comfortable with being where they've been. I had a sister who lived within 2 miles of her house. Had a bakery, had a butcher shop. I mean, everything she needed was there, but never felt like she wanted to get beyond it. And eventually you do end up like cement. You just solidify and you get stuck. And it's easy. I mean, it's easier in some ways, but you're not leveraging all your capabilities. You're not testing things out. Even a car sitting around long enough needs to be taken out on a road or upgraded to some extent. And you don't want to get stale. And the beauty of this world is everybody already knows the result, right? If, we're only here for a short time, what are you doing with it? And I look at life as a blessing every day, as a gift, right? And how do I want to apply it? And some people are afraid of losing, are
Right.
afraid of ridicule. And their fear just continues to keep them with a smiley face when they're not happy, hide their shame or their fear or any other emotion. And you then get detached from your own self. And you're living a lie or you live in someone else's world. And I think expression goes a long way. Standing up for yourself when you have to, raise your hand, sharing information to help other people, because not everybody knows everybody's sensitivities. And today it's even worse, where you almost have to preface everything. I don't want to get into anything political. I don't want to get anything religious, where you don't want to offend people. And at the same time, you're taking a softer approach to something that might take a more direct approach. So anyways, going back to Dave.
That's all great stuff. And I'm stuck in the word mindset that's been thrown out there a few times. And Jason, to your point, I want to try to bring this all together is we're overloaded with information, as you said, and we're bombarded with negativity. And our mindset overall is a community, not individually necessarily, but community-wise, we're looking for the worst case scenarios. We're not looking for what is going to be good out of this. And if we can get beyond that and our mindset shift to a positive focus, I'm going to your comment, weed through the chaff, I'm going to separate all this out and say, okay, you're being really negative. What's positive in here that I can come above? Then we'll find ourselves a much happier people, or individually at least. And I want to have a shameless plug here, but I'm also thinking of the 4M mindset. The approach I took to getting over mental health issues. Catherine, movement, just getting up and getting around and looking at it from a different angle. I have a problem with a car, and I'm looking at it. I can't get this one bolt undone. I'm going to change my angle. I'm going to move. Mindset I just talked about of how do we train our brains to focus on the positives? How do we get beyond the negative that we're hearing? And then only 3 of the 4 here, but the meaning. What's our purpose in life? To Don's comments, what is it you want to achieve? Do you want to just go with the flow and be in your 2-mile circle and cement yourself, or do you want to express your true self to the world and explore? And I remember when I first joined the Navy a while ago, we'll just leave it at that. I remember going into it thinking, well, every place has been explored. There's been guys at the North Pole, South Pole, space, bottoms of the ocean. And a buddy of mine, God bless him for all he did in the Navy, but he solidly said to me, he goes, yeah, all those guys have done it, but have you? Okay, I'm going to go explore places that I haven't been yet. I won't say where he is now because prison is not a happy place, but he had an impact on me right there, and it changed my mindset of how I approached my Navy career from then on. So it's very important that we look at these things for the positive, to Don's point of what do we really want to get out of the life? Because we only have one life. Or I guess there is a quote that man lives 2 lives. The second one starts when we realize we only have one. So just a couple of thoughts.
Great thoughts, Dave. Jason?
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, yeah, the military was a blessing. I only did 5 years. I know Dave did a lot longer, but the opportunity to travel the world, this little boy from Tracy, California, the town of 20,000 people when he was born, that I went to Idaho, I think, to see relatives, was the most I had traveled before that. But then living in other countries and seeing other cultures, good and bad, seeing the good and bad around the world, and being able to take from those experiences allowed my mind to get that curious and flexible thinking. It allowed me to do that. And so, not everyone has that opportunity, and that's the given. But what you do with, once again, what you do with what you've got is so important. There's people that are always ready to, I'm going to get out of this place as soon as I, whatever. And that's their life. And some people are like, no, I'm happy what I'm doing, and if that works for them. But I would offer, and it doesn't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to be going to the North Pole. It can be trying something different. I recently, I went back to my hometown. It's about 2 hours from where I live, and visiting, and they have a huge population of people from India. And so they have the supermarket that's for people from India. It's all the products, all the produce, healthcare stuff. And I'm like in heaven in there. I'm like, what's this? What's this? I go in there shopping every time I go back. I've been back twice since I've discovered this place. And what's this vegetable? What's this fruit? What's this soap? Or, just different things to see that I wouldn't have experienced before, because it literally comes from India. And it's stuff that here in the States that we don't get exposed to. As an example, a personal example, of just being open to these different things, and like, what's this and what's that? And, in Buddhism, what do we talk about? The beginner's mindset. Always be a tourist. Wherever you're going, be a tourist, because that mindset will get you to go beyond your bounds. If you know everything, first of all, you're boring. Sorry. If you're a person that I know everything, I don't want to have a conversation with you. If you're not open to new ways and new things and new ways of thinking, why are we even talking? But when you're open to new things, and it's like, hey, I'm ready to learn. I've done this 6 times, but I'll look at it from your viewpoint. Have you ever gone to like maybe my brother's a Disney family? I guarantee if they go with someone that's never been to Disney before, it's a different experience for him.
Yeah.
So be open to that. Be open to new things, and you will go beyond your bounds and what's tying you down.
Mm-hmm.
Great points. Catherine?
I think it's so interesting because to what you were talking about, Dave, about making choices, right? And choosing that you're going to go to different places. And it is also a choice of what you're talking about also, Jason, that you're choosing to be open, right? You're choosing to look at things that way and to experience things that way. And I think that we all have a choice as to how much information we actually allow in, because not all information is useful actually to us. Some of it's detrimental. And so, okay, I don't need that anymore, right? I don't need to expose myself to that. Not to be Pollyanna about it, though we do have a choice as to what we allow, what we feed our mind, right? And and what we feed our mind also brings us to what we choose to fuel ourselves with nutritionally. And and finding these things in this new market that you discovered, Jason, it's just like, oh my gosh, how fun is this?
Yeah.
And so I think to be able to, getting back to moving like the water, there are so many places to explore that it's a fabulous way of being, to be open, and your body is much happier too. When your mind is happy, your body's happy, and it's this cycle that you get much more enjoyment out of life. And yes, you do want to ascend and transcend different situations, because sometimes these situations, when we're evolving and we're no longer a fit for them, it's like kids when they're growing and their shoes get too small. It's kind of the same thing, right? You've got to get a bigger pair of shoes to keep walking.
Well, you make a great point. That whole analogy with a goldfish in a bowl, right? Or any fish in a bowl. You're never going to grow bigger than the bowl that you're in, right? And at the same time, when we talk about adventure and transcendence, it can be as simple as just going a different route to work every day. It doesn't have to be mind blowing or civilization changing. It just has to be awareness. And the other key thing is intention.
Mhm. Intention is huge. It's unfortunate that.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
No, you had frozen, so I was just picking up on your, comment about intention, because if we're not intentional, then the time gets away from us, and we never get the time back, right? And so it's wanting to make the best use of our time, the most effective use of our time, the most enjoyable use of our time. And even when things are not necessarily enjoyable, they are on a certain level because we're learning. And we don't move forward if we're not learning. And I think that in that, from that perspective, I believe that you can find the fun in just about anything.
Yeah, you're so right, Catherine. Everything is what you make it. And I think the challenge in most cases is equality, right? You want to make it the same for everybody, but not everybody needs the same. So sometimes you have enough for one person to eat, and one person gets a meal if the other person allows it, versus no, you're not going to get more than I get. We're going to go 50-50 or something. And priorities change as you change.
Mm-hmm.
So what's important to somebody is really nothing to you. If it's a big deal to them and it's nothing to you, it's like, go first. If you're in a hurry, I'm not, go ahead of me. It's moving things along.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't want to get is stuck. And also, you don't want to get petty, where you're majoring in the minors. You're spending a whole conversation on what were we talking about here. And sometimes you get into tangents and places, and you're right. Time is something we only have so much of, and we never know how much that is until it's done. Fortunately, you don't know it was over when it's over. Other people may. But before I get too deep into something that's kind of out there, Dave.
I'm happy to hear out there ideas, Don, anytime. Catherine, excuse me, I'm going to go back to be like water. That to me, it reminded me, for those listening and watching, is to watch Bruce Lee interview Be Like Water. And that's where I first learned about that, being flexible and being able to move with the environment around you is critical, because we get so rigid in our thinking, our mindsets, our approaches to life, our physical movement, even, that when something blocks us, we just say, well, either I'm going to quit or I'm going to just boulder through it and try to break them down, when getting around them might be the better answer. Mm-hmm. Water is fluid. It's not, like you said, it's not going to wait for the rock to move. It's going to move around the rock. And his daughter wrote a wonderful book, I think it's called Be Water, My Friend. His quote from his talk back in the 60s. And I highly recommend it to anybody who wants to listen to it or read it. I won't say it transformed my life, but it definitely gave me other ways to think about problems and how to approach things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so valuable. And I'll just say hello to George Than, new person. Thank you so much for being here today. Beautiful minds. Thank you all for sharing, and have a wonderful week. Same to you. And hopefully you come back and visit us again. With that, I'll move it right over to Jason.
Not to be the one note pony on here talking about having diverse thoughts, but the one thing that keeps coming into mind is it's that mindset. It's about, how do you transcend something? Is that you be open to what's out there, what's beyond. And something that I thought about that is like living your life like you're that young kid that doesn't want to go to bed because you might miss something. You're falling asleep and you're dozing, but you're like, no, there's more to see. I don't want to miss something, because something magical is going to happen after you go to bed. And we all have to go to sleep at some point. but why not enjoy the moments that we have? And I share, there's a poem from Robert Frost, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, that I share and I've written about because it really stuck to me. And the ending of it says, "The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep." And that's how I live my life, is I've got miles to go before I sleep.
Mhm.
And so I try to transcend at every chance that I get. Now, I love to be stable. You know, the one thing that I talk about is about, if you have a wagon with four wheels and the wheels are shaking and you're going fast, what do you have to do? Stop, tighten the wheels up, and then go again. You know, I'm not saying go till the wheels fall off, because that's not a good lifestyle either, but being open to what comes next and trying things and being there, because that's when these fun things show up. And then have stability.
Mhm.
You know, we have your home, have the place where you can rest. And if you're blessed to have that mindset of home and those people that are home, and, you know, talking about community, that you can settle and catch your breath. All right, I know these people, I know this place, I feel comfortable. All right, let's go again. You know, it's like in the military, when you deploy, you go out and you have these crazy times, but it's always nice to come home and get some leave and go home and see your family and get those roots. Make sure your roots are strong, and then you continue to grow.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Catherine?
Well, and expanding more on expanding the roots, right? I agree with you that it's highly important, because that's where so much of our strength comes from, and it allows us to grow taller, to to be more expansive, and always also being in tune with the root system, right? Because we don't get anywhere solely on our own. And getting back to the burning bridges concept, some bridges we do want to burn. And also understanding that our root system needs attention in both directions, right? In all directions. And so sometimes I have found, I've changed my schedule because somebody in my family needed help with something, right? And I also know people that they don't do that. And they might have more money than me, but I guarantee you they're not happier than I am, right? And I think it's important to consider all the aspects, and how are we feeding ourselves, and how are we helping to feed the other people that are important to us. I think that's something that needs to be considered.
Well, and it's all a matter of perspective.
Mhm.
And at a certain point, you figure if you've gotten this far, you'll probably be able to leg it out, right? If somehow you found a way to eat and find shelter and have some clothes, you probably have enough momentum that the fears you had at 20 aren't going to be the same fears you had later on.
Mhm.
And you feel more confident and competent,
Mhm.
right? Because if if it's up to me, if it's going to be, it's up to me is a good slogan. And a smart guy told me a long time ago, to be rich, all you need is $1 more than you can spend, right? Another million is just false security, or you're insecure and you feel like if you have that, but the problem with that is when you get it, it's still not enough. So no matter how much you have, if it's not enough, maybe you have enough of that. And it's usually an imbalance. There's other parts of your life that you're really narrow and shallow and not even involved in. And to be a risk taker doesn't mean you take unnecessary risks, but you take calculated risks,
Right.
right? The world's going to keep moving with or without you, so you're going to get left behind if you don't make a move.
Mhm.
Or you'll be on the sidelines watching somebody else's parade.
Mhm.
And that's not always fun. You know, you never know what you don't know, and that's the mystery of life.
Yeah.
And always what's behind that door, what's around that corner, what did that person mean? You know, some things are clues or stick with you. and it makes you follow up, right? That's pretty interesting. I never thought of that. And I think by being open and attaching to new ideas, new ways of doing things, can make all the difference in the world for waking up excited, because that whole element of curiosity. Well, that's true, and I never thought that was true, but now I know. Now it changes so many other things that I need to start to focus on. So it's constant reevaluation. Is this fit, right? It's like clothes. It's really easy to understand, well, I grew out of this. Well, then you need new clothes, or you need a way of getting back into the old clothes, but the way it is now is not sustainable. And I think that's important. So coming up on top of the hour, I'll let Dave share final words, and then we'll move around the horn.
Yeah, thanks, Don. This has been a wonderful hour, and I'm glad Catherine can make it back. It's always great to see you, Catherine. As I think about transcending, it's identifying what is missing, or not even missing, but what it is do I want in life, or out of my day, or from my people around me, and then making it happen, and going beyond what I know is where I am right now. So growing, thinking, learning, always have a place in all of this in our lives to help us transcend beyond where we are. I'll just leave it real quick at that.
Jason.
It's so true. And also thank you all. Thank you, Don, for all the support and all the community and bringing us all together. And Catherine, it's great to see you again and hear from you, and love learning from you and learning from all of you. You know, we said it just a minute ago, talked about it, you know, have a strong base. You know, no one's telling you to go out and change your life tomorrow, you know, but be open to it. Be open to transcending, be open to what's more out there. And that starts with, like I said in the very beginning, that starts with awareness. Where are you at now? How can you be strong? Because you have to be strong to be able to change, because change can be challenging, you know. So that's one thing, you know, just know that you are where you're at, and you can be better, and things can grow. And Dawn, I love what you said about you don't know what you don't know, because I was going to mention that, you know, that's a key to all of this. You don't know what you don't know, you know, so keep growing, keep going. This is a hypnotic technique I want to throw at you real quick. And it's like, you ask people, what I want you to do is I want you to think about everything you're not thinking about right now. What? So in your life, what is it you're not thinking about right now? That's what else is out there. And be open to that, and be open to seeing different ways of doing things and being and living this wonderful life. Because as we've all said, we have one, and let's enjoy it while we're here. Thank you.
Sounds great. I'll switch right over to Catherine after I recognize Mark. Thank you. Must step off. Thanks for the opportunity to listen into your conversation. Well, thank you. It's individuals like you that make this all worthwhile. So, Catherine.
Well, it's also fun, and I love spending time with you guys. So thank you very much, because I love the conversations. I love the thoughts. I love the growth that happens for all of us. You know, when we have these kinds of conversations. I would also offer that as we do grow, and what's interesting about curiosity is it does open us up, and so it automatically raises our vibration a little bit. So as we get a little more curious, the vibration goes up, and then, you know, and then there's a vibrational match to something there, and it's like, oh, okay, and it kind of feeds on itself, right? And so we just the higher we go on the vibrational scale, the more fun opportunities are the ones that live there. Right. And that's really what we're looking for. So when we understand that we have choices and there are things that we can do to raise our vibration, to do this transcending, you know, it's way more than an exercise, but it becomes a way of life. Right. And so the adventure of it. And so as the vibration goes up, that's where the opportunities are that can help us go to even further. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to spend time with you guys today. Thank you.
Thank all of you. And, you know, you mentioned love about 5 different times in your last part. And I do believe love is the answer. And if you live a loving life surrounded with and around love, with the intention of love, you're going to win, right? In so many ways, as opposed to what do I have I can hold? It's really what do I have that I can feel, and feel that support and feel that love, because you're going to get yourself into situations knowingly or unknowingly. Having a loving environment, a supportive environment, that whatever it is, it's okay. You know, you always need or would appreciate somebody around you. So no matter what it is, you're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. The future is only going to get brighter. And sometimes you're in a dark place when you hear that and you think, you know, how silly if you say that. But it's true. And when you give love for the sake of being a loving person and not for receiving something, you'll be surprised at what you do receive, because you trust the universe. They say faith is the belief in the invisible, you know, and when you can believe in what you can't see or feel or hear at this time, it's coming. Are you going to be there for it? Are you going to be available, right? The opportunity knocks, doesn't mean anything unless you're near that door. Right? And I think that's, they say luck is when preparation meets opportunity, and you may not always have opportunity, but you have plenty of time for preparation. So maybe that'll be the word we come up with next time, is preparation or love or a million other things. But with that said, I want to thank all of my lovely friends today. And, you know, this program is grounded in love and giving it, sharing it. And that can come in the form of knowledge or inspiration or whatever, because someone does have a key that you can use to unlock what you're looking for if you allow yourself to be open to it. So with that said, want to thank Catherine, want to thank Dave, Jason, and to look forward to all of us coming back together again. And with that, go out there and transcend like you never transcended before.
Thank you.